welcome to the final star rating for the Great Dark Beyond. We're going to deal with Warlock, Warrior, and the neutral cards as well. And actually, we're going to have two more bonus cards at the end as well. But more to them later. Anyway, we'll start off with the Warlock class. There is sort of like two big packages with Warlock. One of them, and this is the final of the Starship pieces, is the Starship package. Felfire Thrusters, Heart of the Legion, and Bad Omen. I think most people consider this to be the worst Starship in the game. I don't think it is. I think the Demon Hunter one is worse. And actually, I can see worlds where this card sees play. Or these cards even see play. I think the gimmick of the Warlock one is that it's a Starship that is meant to effectively, like a Reno-like effect, that it will restore 20 health to your hero at some point. So if you're playing some sort of control-based deck or you're a combo deck, this Starship will get you a big chunk of health to restore you back to full again so that you can live and do all the cheaty things you want to do during the course of the game. One deck in particular I think that might run the Starship package is the Wheellock deck. Wheellock, the way that works is you play the Wheel of Death, it destroys your deck, and then you have to live for now 6 turns effectively before the wheel effect goes off and just kills your opponent at whatever health total they're at. For that deck, you normally had to find like 4 or 5 different ways to like stall a turn out, and when it got changed between where the counter worked on the wheel, so you had to like live for one more turn, it made it so that it was hard to have that many different options in your hand to survive for those amount of turns, and normally you would fall over before your wheel went off. The Starship is nice because you can build it on the board and leave it on the board so that when you wheel your deck, it doesn't matter, right? You lose your deck, you have the Starship on the board, it doesn't matter, it's going to survive. You launch the Starship, you spell burst it with some spell in your hand, and assuming your opponent has 2 minions, it's going to heal, let's say, for about 14 health. That's a pretty nice amount of healing, and it's just going to be a big wall that your opponent's going to have to deal with, because it has lifesteal. They can't just leave it on the board, otherwise you'll just constantly heal back up. Now, there are some downsides to this. You need 2 enemy minions on the board is one of them, which, to be fair, if you're playing against Wheellock, you're almost certainly going to be trying to put minions on the board because you need to race your opponent down, so it does catch them in a funny situation. However, I just think there are better things that Control Warlock can do to stay alive, other than just launching these Starships. It does mean that you're, like, part of the reason you're going to be so far behind is that you're playing the Starship pieces to begin with, so just don't play the Starship pieces, is kind of my logic. And a Bad Omen, if you don't hit it with the Starship turn, it is actually really bad. Like, the 2-turn summon 2/6 demons for 6 with Taunt is really, really bad. Like, it might be the worst one of the cards that require you to have a Starship piece on the board, that their effect, if you don't have the Starship piece on the board, it's really, really bad. So, for those reasons, I think it's actually going to be like a tier 4-ish deck, the Wheellock with the Starship package. So I've given them all 2 stars. Maybe it could get pushed to 3. If you said, like, I actually think that's 3 stars, I was like, you know what? I'd agree with you, buddy. But I've erred on the side of, I think it's not going to quite work. The big package that Warlock got was this Demons that don't start in your deck archetype with Foreboding Flame, Infernal Stratagem, Archimond, Abduction Ray, and Black Hole. I don't think this is going to work either. And the main reasons for this are the pool of demons that Warlock can go into is just too big. There are too many demons in the game right now, and too many of them aren't very good. Also, there's a couple of demons out there that are just not good to get, and with basically dead cards in your hand. The other aspect of this is that the way to generate demons is just too slow right now. So I'm actually not sure if you played Foreboding Flame whether or not you would have enough time to play enough demons to actually make the cost back on playing the Foreboding Flame to begin with, because 2 mana 2/3 is obviously not very good. It itself is also not a demon, so it doesn't get any discounts if you generated more of these. So, for me, I think you have to play about 3 demons that you've discovered, or, you know, generated that didn't start in your deck, I suppose, to be more accurate, for the Foreboding Flame turn to have actually been worth it. And I actually think that might be quite hard to do with this deck. So, for those reasons, I just don't see it. Now, I believe the eventual goal is that you would kill Jaiden to generate all these demons that didn't start in your deck. And they would all get a 1 mana discount, or 2 mana if you play both Foreboding Flames. But I'm here to tell you that's irrelevant. Who cares? It so doesn't matter. Because you're limited by the fact that you're going to be drawing a demon a turn. So it doesn't matter if you could conceivably play 2 demons per turn, you're drawing 1 card at a time. Now, you are Warlock, you could draw, you know, another card by pushing the button, but then you're requiring way bigger discounts because you've only got 8 mana to play with. So you're looking at 2 demons that cost 4 mana. I think you're just going to break the back anyway by just playing a demon a turn, so I just don't see the Foreboding Flame being a good enough investment. Now, Infernal Stratagem is a slightly different case because I can see a world where you want to play Infernal Stratagem to play Kil'jaeden earlier. Kil'jaeden being the neutral card that destroys your deck, turns into a portal, and you get a demon from the portal every single turn that gets progressively stronger and stronger. I'm here to tell you, I watched some of the Theory Crafting stream again, and there was a funny matchup between, I think it was between Warlock and Warlock, where they both played Kil'jaeden, and the person that played Kil'jaeden early lost to the Kil'jaeden late player. Because the late player had more options to deal with boards. Because here's the thing about playing these progressively bigger and bigger demons. They are slow typically to react to your opponent's board. There are some demons that can act quickly, but for the most part, they are just, you know, a minion with a big stat line, which means you can out-temper them with your own cards. Or, again, you can just control your opponent if you've got those cards. And that's actually what happened. One person had more control cards, had more bigger value cards. The other one had actually, like, reduced their hand size considerably, playing quickly to get Kil'jaeden up first. And they lost the game, so I don't think playing Kil'jaeden as quickly as possible is necessarily the correct choice, especially in the control matchup. I think there are certain key cards you'll want to get into your hand before you Kil'jaeden. This gets us to Archimonde. Archimonde, I think it's just too difficult to generate lots of demons during the course of the game. Now, the exception is Kil'jaeden. Actually, I think Archimonde, of all of these cards, has the most likelihood to see play in some sort of deck. Because after you drop Kil'jaeden, you're going to generate random demons every single turn, which means that Archimonde eventually will be a big board fill of guys. Now, you don't get the buffs on the minions when you come out from Archimonde, but it is still a big tempo swing, right, to play Archimonde and fill your board with demons. So, for just that one reason alone, that you might be able to break your opponent's back after playing, like, demon after demon after demon, you can eventually cause your opponent to lose all of their control cards, the hard removal, and you just drop an Archimonde on the board. That is going to be backbreaking. But I think this idea of playing, like, Foreboding Flame into the demonic dynamics, which is going to get buffed as well, or has been buffed, I just don't see it. Although, if I was going to see it, and I have put together a deck that does discover some demons, has Archimonde in it, I think it's going to go into Handlock, where you're getting another reward for generating all these demons in your hand, and there is discounts to things like Mountain Giant, or discounts to some of your table flips, for example, or your, what's it called now, the 4 mana one that generates a imp that's the same size as your hand. I've forgotten its name, but playing that card as well, so you get some other benefit for generating the demon. So Handlock, I think, is sitting around tier 3-ish right now, tier 3, tier 4, so I believe all these cards will be 3 stars. I think they'll all go into that deck if they're going to go into a deck. I actually don't think Foreboding Flame will make the cut of that deck, but I've edged on the side of caution, and maybe it will make the list. I'm actually not sure Infernal Stratagem will make that list either, to be honest with you, so I've been a bit kind here. They could definitely quite easily be 1-star cards. Archimonde, I think, will make that list, though. Now, Abduction Ray and Black Hole, which again are demon cards, I think Abduction Ray is too expensive for what it does. Conceivably, in Handlock, it's a pretty nice thing to just have a card that can generate a lot of cards, because that's what Handlock is. They want to fill the hand as quickly as possible, to some degree. They also want cards that, you know, can answer your opponent's cards with, like, 1 card answers 3 cards, for example. Which Abduction Ray doesn't really give you, but it gives you the cards in hand, right? It gives you lots of cards. Now, here's the problem. Demonic Dynamics saw no play at 3 mana generate 2 demons, give them, I think it's +2/+2, right? The effect on the finale. And I believe that is pretty close to the 2 mana discount getting the +2/+2 on it. Abduction Ray to generate 2 demons is 4 mana. And Demonic Dynamics has just been buffed to be 2 mana, so I actually don't think Abduction Ray will see any play because it's too expensive. If there was a way to discount this to 1, though, I think it would definitely get into that list. I would definitely add it to my list. You know, 1 mana discount a demon by 2, repeatable, very good. I don't think that would ever, you know, happen as a change because it'd be too good. They take the reduction down as well. But because of these reasons, I think this is 2 stars. And also to get to Black Hole, which I've also given 2 stars to, this card can't ever be good. This is my hot take of the day. This card can never be good. Why? As I take a sip of tea. Well, if Demon Warlock was ever really strong, if it was ever the tier 1-ist deck, it means that Black Hole gets worse. The better this deck gets, the worse it is, because it doesn't hit demons. So if you're in the mirror matchup, Black Hole does nothing. And actually, we saw this a few times on the Theory Crafting stream as well, where Demon Warlock would go up against the Demon Warlock, and Black Hole was just a dead card. In fact, the best use for Black Hole was to kill the Starships, which they were also ring in that deck often. Black Hole might see some play had there been no other Warlock options to destroy all minions on the board. Unfortunately for Warlock, fortunately if you want to look at it that way, there is. It's called Twisting Nether. So I think that this deck will run Twisting Nether if, you know, it wants to run one of these big removals. And I think they would only run one copy of it if they were going to do it. Now, if we were in a world where, like, Warlock is not that strong, the demon packages aren't that strong, obviously this makes Black Hole way, way better. So it's going to be a card that gets better the weaker that the Warlock package is, or the least it's played, I suppose, to be more accurate. So I kind of see it as a tech card, so I've only given it 2 stars. The final 2 cards, one of them is Kiara the Dark Star, which is a card that I think is meant to go into this demon package. It wants you to play a ton of shadow spells. Realistically, it wants you to play Abduction Ray multiple times and steal your opponent's health. Ridiculous, 1 star. I appreciate there are some mean combos you can set up with this card, with the copy a minion effect, which is also a shadow spell which will hit the spell burst. But it's just too many hoops to jump through. I actually think this is a ridiculous card that was ever printed, because in the recent past, we had Snakelock, which was a deck that was in tier 3, arguably. It was hard to work out because it only lasted for 4 days. And people hated it so much, they hated this idea of health being stolen from your hero, that they nerfed this deck. Even though it wasn't performing particularly well, they nerfed it into the ground. Which kind of implied that, okay, there are some game mechanics that you should just never interact with. It just creates such a toxic gameplay state. And for Kiara, they've kind of delved back into that, or they've dabbled into that state again. Sure, it's a random enemy. It might be that it hits a minion. It might be that it hits the face. And the health stolen isn't going onto your hero, it's going onto your minion. But I think because of it being so toxic, they've had to understat this card to a ridiculous level. The combos are simply not worth setting up, and it's actually hard to get lethal from it. So for those reasons, 1 star. I just don't see this ever working. Finally is Hearthstone, 0 mana tradable spell that restores all damage your hero has taken this turn. I actually think this card is pretty good, but it won't see any play in the Demon deck, it won't see play in the Starship deck. I think this is going to go into Insanity Warlock, which unfortunately, just as this set came out, got nerfed. I still think Insanity Warlock is going to hover around the tier 2 region, so I've actually given this 4 stars, and I think they'll just slot straight into the deck. You take a huge chunk of fatigue damage, for example, the spell that does, fatigue damage twice. You might take 8 damage, for example, from it, which is pretty bad for you, and then you just drop a Hearthstone and heal it back up again. Very nice. That deck does run some heal cards to stabilize, and I think this is better than what they're running right now, so for those reasons, I think it'll go into that deck. Whether or not Insanity is still going to be tier 2 or tier 3 right now, I don't know, but I suspect that deck is still pretty strong, even with the 1 mana increase on, I think it was Crescendo, right, that got a 1 mana increase. It'll still be pretty strong. Now we go to Warrior, the final class. Warrior is basically just the Draenei package, to be honest with you. And I think this is going to be a pretty spooky deck. I actually, at the time when I saw it, thought this was going to be a tier 1 deck. It just looked like it had all the things in the right places. It had like hand buff type thing, and hand buff Paladin's pretty strong right now. It had tempo with minions. The Stalwart Avenger, I think, is going to be a crazy card. This fucking Yu-Gi-Oh! Ass card that alternates between attack mode and defense mode. Crazy. And then X-Archer Karma basically gives your board Wind Fury, as long as you can give it some sort of rush-like effect. And there's a few ways to give this thing a rush-like effect in Warrior. I've slightly cooled on this package a little bit, but I still think it's going to be a really good tempo deck. It kind of reminds me a little bit of, do you remember Crusader's Aura in the Paladin package? Where you'll try and generate a board, then play Crusader's Aura, and just overrun your opponent's face with the minions. I see this matchup being the same way. You're going to have to never let Warrior have a board, because X-Archer Karma could come up at any one time and just obliterate you, so. Now, what is worth mentioning about that deck is that deck wasn't ever tier 1. It was, at best, like a low tier 2 end deck. So, I've kind of taken a similar measurement for this deck. I've pegged it to that deck. And as a result, I've put it in tier 2. So, I think they're all going to be 4 stars. With the exception of Captain's Log, which I've actually given 3 stars to. I'm not sure Captain's Log will make this deck. There's 2 different ways of building it. One of them is to use some additional hand buff spells, like Char and Cup of Must Circle. Muscle Circle, oh my god, I'm playing Peglin. Cup of Muscle. To buff your minions in hand as well. I think the hand buff cards are pretty weak in Warrior though, so I'm actually not sure those cards are good enough. And what might be better instead, because realistically with the hand buff deck, you just want to have as many Draenei in this case in hand as possible, because the hand buffing cards are specific for Draenei. I think you might run very few spells, aka maybe no spells, and you just use Magatha instead. So I have two different lists of this deck. I don't know which one's going to be better, but I suspect the one which uses Magatha and stuff like Instrument Tech to draw your weapon faster is going to be better. In which case Captain's Log won't make that deck. Also, I think Captain's Log it's an okay card, but you might not actually get 2 Draenei on the board, which is kind of what you need to get for Captain's Log to be good. So I'm not sure about it. The final 4 cards just fall in this remit of some sort of control value card. Spore Empress Moldara, Hostile Invader, Jettison, and Dwarf Planet. Spore Empress Moldara is an interesting effect. You put 7 spores into the deck. They are 5-cost spells that, as you cast them, you get the minions back from the other spores you played during the course of the game. So the effect gets stronger and stronger and stronger over time. Problem, you can low roll some of the 5-drops, in which case, like, you're so behind on tempo, it's crazy. If the first random 5-drop you generate from the spores is garbage, like, I think there's a 4/1 for 5 mana, for example, or there or thereabouts, then it doesn't matter if your next spore casts the original 5-drop and a new 5-drop, it's still going to be a pretty bad deal. Most minions have understated stat lines for their mana cost because they have strong battle cries. So I think you're going to have to get to the point where you're able to cast 3 spores. You can do that in a control deck. I don't think it's crazy, but I just think there are better cards to put into your control deck than this one. That being said, maybe it is a backbreaking card. Maybe Highlander Warrior runs this, for example, just to extend the game out a little bit longer. And again, just to try and break the back of opposing control decks by just constantly playing boards of bigger and bigger stuff. That being said, I don't think it's going to work. Jettison, I think, is going to be bad, by the way, just full stop. I think 2 mana, discover 2 cards isn't actually good enough necessarily to see play anymore in Standard. And you have to spend 2 armor to actually do that anyway, so it's actually got a downside on it. Terrible. And Dwarf Planet is 10 mana Doomsayer. we all know it. It's going to be 10 mana Doomsayer. Crazy. You cannot play this card. I think it's just going to be super weak. So, for those reasons, I've given all of these 1-star. Now, I will admit, Hostile Invader should also be a 1-star card. However, I like this card, so I've given it 2 stars. It has some upsides, okay? This I see as a tech card for your Highlander Warrior or your Control Warrior. If the meta got so unbelievably token driven, Hostile Invader is effectively going to clear a board of tokens. It is a 5 mana card. It's a bit too expensive, in my opinion, to do the job it's there to do, but you know what? I like it. I like the effect of it. I like that it makes your opponent decide whether or not to rush the face and deny the spell burst, or hit the minion and get death rattled and killed in the process. So, for those reasons, I've decided to give it 2 stars. I decided to treat it as a tech card, but realistically, it's a 1-star card. It won't see any play. Now we get to the neutral cards, and I'm going to do the neutrals slightly differently than the other cards, in the fact that I'm going to separate them into 5-star cards, 4-star cards, 3 cards, 2, and finally 1-star cards. Right, let me take a sip of tea. And we'll get down to it, because this is the big bulk of cards now. Okay, in 5-star lands, I've actually only got 3 cards from neutral in 5-star lands. Kil'jaeden is one of them, and I will say on Kil'jaeden, I don't think Kil'jaeden will be in a tier 1 deck. So you might ask why they've given it 5 stars. I think it's going to go into almost every single control deck, and it will do for like the next year. If you're a control deck and your opponent runs Kil'jaeden and you don't, you're going to lose. You will not be able to beat that infinite amount of value unless you're a combo deck, in which case, you know, combo typically beats control regardless. So for those reasons, because I think it's going to be in so many different decks, and it's going to be pretty important for an entire archetype of decks, I've pushed it into the 5-star category. Ethereal Oracle, I think, is going to go into the Rogue deck, the Quasar Rogue deck. I actually can see this going into a couple of other decks as well. 3 mana 2/3 spell damage and spell burst, draw 2 cards is, more specifically spells as well, is extremely strong as a neutral card. Like 3 mana 2/3 draw 2 with spell damage. Yes, please, but specifically the Quasar deck will almost certainly run this card. It's a 3 or less minion, so it'll become a 0 cost, and you're going to cast a spell, which you probably will do in that deck because you need to kill your opponent with spells. It'll draw 2 more spells with it, and you probably want the spell damage because you're probably going to be running Eviscerate. It just has everything that you want and more. Now, the final card is going to surprise you, so let me do some explanations. Moonstone Mauler, I've put as a 5-star card as well. Now, why do I think Moonstone Mauler is going to be a good card? Because clearly it's not because I think the Asteroid package is going to work, because I don't think the Asteroid package is going to work. The clue is Ethereal Oracle. I think this is going to get run by Quasar Rogue, because there are not quite enough options to deal damage to your opponent's face, potentially. But you're going to have to run the Moonstone Mauler. It's less than 3 cost. It puts Asteroids into your deck. It gets hit by the Ethereal Oracle as well, so the Asteroids will do 3 instead. And I think this will give you the final bump of damage you need to OTK your opponent without using the Beatboxer MC Blingtron combo instead. So for that reason, I think it's going to go into a tier 1 deck. Therefore, I had to give it 5 stars. So here it is in the 5-star department. But I will completely limit on this. Other than that Quasar Rogue deck, I think this is at best a 3-star card in the Asteroid deck. In 4-star land, I've actually got quite a lot of cards. I think this is the set with the most neutrals I've put in the 4-star realm, but it actually makes sense when you start to see the cards that go in here. I put Nexus Prince Jafar in here. You can actually see this card already in action, and it's already in a tier 2 deck, so I kind of cheated to some degree by putting this in here. The next 2 cards are Starship cards. I think one of the Starship decks, aka Druid, will function as a deck, and I think you'll put Arcanite Defense Crystal in that deck. So for that reason, this had to be a 4-star card. I probably would have also bumped it up to some degree if I didn't think any of them were going to work, because Arcanite Defense Crystal, I think, is the better of the 2 neutral Starship pieces. It lets you live for a bit longer, and it almost like makes up for the lack of tempo that you're going to have playing some of these cards. Similarly, the Exodar, I think, is going to be a 4-star card because of Druid mainly, but almost all of these Starship decks will want you to play the Exodar to launch it, because the effect of the Exodar is so powerful, and in the case of Druid, you'll want to get back your Starship piece, because it's a combo card, effectively, to cast your arcane spells multiple times, in which case you'll probably do that. And I will say, actually, on the Exodar front, I couldn't see a reason why you would get the Starship pieces back again, but actually having seen the demonstration streams and actually thinking about, like, some of the other cards out there, I actually think that might be a stronger option than some of the other ones, just to get your Starship pieces back, play them onto the board again, get them all killed, and then launch the Starship again into some big beefy guy. I can somewhat see that, but it's just getting to that point in the game that it's going to be the problem. The next chunk of cards are Draenei cards, and this is kind of like why the 4-star series is so swamped. Because they introduce a new tribe and so many decks are like dabbling in that tribe as well, they had to just push out lots of Draenei cards in the neutrals. And as a result, I think some of these are going to see play in some pretty strong decks. I actually don't think any of the Draenei deck are going to be tier 1, I think. Yes, I think that's true. However, for example, I think Warrior it will have a tier 2 deck. And I think Starlight Wanderer, Stranded Spaceman, Troubled Mechanic, Crimson Commander, Ace Wayfinder, and Velen are all going to get into that deck. I will say, though, in particular on these cards, I actually think Ace Wayfinder and Velen are grossly overrated, especially Ace Wayfinder. If Ace Wayfinder wasn't in my Warrior deck, which I think you kind of have to because there's not enough Draenei to run it without it, and you want Draenei to get buffed by the Crimson Commander, I wouldn't put it in any other tier 2 deck. I think it's actually fairly weak. And similarly, I don't think there's enough good payoffs in the Draenei for all the classes for Velen to be played. So, if it weren't for Warrior, there are some of these cards that definitely going to drop down the pecking order. Astral Vigilant, I think, is a very solid card to get copies of your Draenei. That's almost certainly going to see play in, well, in Warrior, for example, but it'll go into the Hunter package, it would have gone into the Paladin package, Shaman probably would have ran it as well, so I think this one is in here on merit. I also think Starlight Wanderer and Troubled Mechanic, in particular, are here on merit. Troubled Mechanic is a good shooter for Draenei, and if Draenei is like one of your big key cards in your deck, this card is going to be fantastic for it. And actually, just Starlight Wanderer, 1 mana 2/1, your next Draenei is +2/+1 stat line. Very, very solid card. By the way, there's 2 more 4-star cards as well. Eredar Brute and the Ceaseless Expanse I've also got in the 4-star category. Eredar Brute is such a great anti-aggression tool that I think it's going to get teched into a lot of decks. Your opponent plays a big swarm of pirates, for example, you just drop an Eredar Brute down on like 3 or 4, and you make them cry, because Taunt Lifesteal is like the nightmare of token decks. And then the Ceaseless Expanse, I think it's going to go into most control decks. I can't remember exactly, but I think the math we did in the reveal was roughly right. I think I said that you're probably going to get this online around at fastest 8 mana crystals, but more realistically, it's going to be like just as you reach 10 mana crystals. And I think on the theory crafting streams when people put this in the deck, that was about the point that this came online. It obviously depends on matchups as well. Control v control is going to take longer, but control versus aggro, and this is really where this would shine. comes up way quicker because they'll be drawing and playing and getting more minions destroyed faster than you. And I think this card effect is so bonkers if you can get it off onto an aggro matchup that I think it will definitely see some play in control decks. In 3-star department, I've actually not got too many cards. I've actually only got Lunar Trailblazer and Star Volpera. Lunar Trailblazer is here because I think it's going to see play in Draenei Shaman, which I think will be a tier 3 deck. Most of the other Draenei I think will go into, like, Warrior, for example, so that's why they all got pushed up artificially. Whereas Luna will not go into that deck because you will not be running expensive spells in that deck, so she got kind of, like, locked in here instead. Star Volpera will only see play if Starships are good, and I've kind of predicted that Starships won't be very good. The one exception is Druid, and the problem with that one is that I think that's going to be strong because the card is strong. In which case, you don't really need Star Volpera to shoot down this big, massive ship. I don't think the Druid ship will ever get to a massive state. Relatively big, yes, but not ginormous, so I don't think you'll need Star Volpera to shoot it down. Now, if down the line there becomes a deck where there is this ginormous spaceship that is generated, then Star Volpera will obviously improve in quality, because you'll have to run it as a tech card against that deck. But I think otherwise, this card on its own right is pretty weak. In 2-star lands, I've got a couple of cards. Dimensional Core, Crystal Welder, Astrobiologist, Escape Pod, and Starscale Constella. I think Dimensional Core, which by the way is the final neutral starship piece, is the weaker of the two, and I think for the most part you never want to use this card because it's so bad. 3 mana, 3/2 Divine Shield is super slow. Most of the starship pieces as well get their effect off of some sort of spell burst type effect. So, or Death Rattle effect, in which case you don't really want to Divine Shield it, or it doesn't matter to Divine Shield it, I guess is more accurate. So, yeah, I just don't see a world where you put this on your starship. I definitely think this is the weaker of the two options. It also doesn't really help as a anti-aggro tool. You don't get a big chunk of armor on it, for example. So, I think this is weaker than the other ones. And generally speaking, I think if you're going to make a starship deck be a starship deck, you're going to run 6 pieces, and most of them will be the 2 ones from your class, plus the Arcanite Defense Crystal. I think that's the better option. Crystal Welder, I think, is getting also a bit overrated from what I've seen on some of the theory crafting things. I know, it's 2 mana 4/5 with Taunt, haha, big. But it won't actually work that way. It kind of reminds me of the cards where it was like these, 2 mana 2/3s with Infuse 3, for example, gain +3/+3. Almost none of those cards ended up being good because, sure, it was 2 mana 5 something eventually, but you weren't playing it until like turn 5 or turn 6, at which point your opponent can deal with that with like 6 mana cards instead, and it's unlikely to live on the board. So I just don't see Crystal Welder working. It's too cheap compared to the other starship pieces. You're not going to have a 1-drop starship on the board. If you did, this card would see some play. I think very sensibly the Hearthstone team decided not to give people a 1-drop starship so that couldn't happen. So I think you're playing Crystal Welder on like turn, at the quickest it will be 3, which is obviously pretty good. But more realistically, you're going to play this on 4, and at turn 4, I don't think it's actually unfair enough anymore. Astrobiologist, I think, is just too vanilla, really. It's 2 mana 2/2 discover a spell. That wouldn't normally see play in Standard. I will say, I think I put this in my Libram Paladin deck for the potential to draw Librams, but that's about it. And if I do end up having that in my final cut, it's literally going to make it as like the 29th or the 30th card. I don't think it's particularly special. Escape Pod I really like as a card. I mentioned this at the time of the reveal, but I just don't think it's going to find its way into any deck, unfortunately. And then finally I've got Starscale Constella here, because I feel like this card's actually pretty good, but I just haven't put it into any of my decks, so I've kind of edged my bets a little bit and put it into 2. The one thing I was actually kind of worried about this card and what maybe sees some play is some sort of Black Rock and Roll Warrior deck with the Tribe package on it, because there are ways to draw spells now in the neutral cards, the Oracle, for example, that we mentioned earlier, Ethereal Oracle. So you could conceivably put a few more spells in your Black Rock and Roll deck to spell burst the Ethereal Oracle to draw you 2 spells. And also, if you can duplicate the stats on this and then hit another spell on this, you get a pretty big beefy boy. Like, it turns into like a 16-14 on 5. That's pretty scary, but I think, again, this is something that's not going to happen until like turns 8, 9, and 10, at which point, big stat line with no effect, effectively no effect once you spell burst it, I don't think is good enough. So I think it actually will be around this 2 to 1 star realm. Finally, the 1-star category, which has the most of the cards in it, which is, not unsurprising. We have Galactic Crusader, Hologram Operator, Urzel Rager, Lightfuse Mana Saber, Deep Space Curator, Perplexing Anomaly, Splitting Space Rock, Red Giant, Relentless Wrathguard, and Doom Maiden. And we have some more on the next slide. Galactic Crusader and Hologram Operator, I think, have the most chance of seeing play in Draenei Priest, which I don't think will be a good deck. 7 mana, 3/9 stat line, just not good enough. Holy spells are just too random. Some of them are good, most of them are bad. Also, a lot of them are less than 3 cost. You're not going to get a full discount. I just think this is a pretty weak card. Hologram Operator is at least kind of interesting because you get random Draenei, so you might hit Draenei from other classes, and actually you might hit their key cards. So I think of most of the cards here, or at least of the Draenei, this might be the one that I've underrated the most. Then again, the Snow Flurry minion that generates temporary frost spells is basically seeing no play. It's saw little bits of play, so I think Hologram Operator, it might get splashed into a deck as a one-off, maybe as a two-off, as like a niche value interaction, but I just don't see it. So maybe I underrate this slightly, but I think it would still be 2 stars at best. Rager is just a meme card. It's not good enough. 3 mana 5/1 we have to spell burst to attack to get lifesteal. At the very best, it's 4 mana lifesteal, 5 damage lifesteal, which is worse than the Death Knight card, which is a spell that's 4 damage for 6 damage lifesteal. Sorry, 4 mana 6 damage lifesteal. So I don't think Urzel Rager will see play. Light Fuse Mana Saber could be like a Zilex like minion, but again, you have to jump through too many hoops to set that up, so I don't see it. Deep Space Curator, it's just too random. I don't think it's going to be worth it. You want to cast a big spell with this thing to get a big minion, but you're just going to get random minions, and some actual big minions aren't very good, so I just don't think it will be consistent enough. The balancing anomaly is just bad. I've heard rumors of people putting this into decks as some sort of like niche interaction with something else. I honestly, I was so unasked with it, I couldn't be bothered seeing what the interaction was. I just don't see the same play. It's just a meme card. Splitting Space Rock is actually really good, but it's only really good if you generate it from Nebulous to give it taunt, so your opponent has to trade into it. I don't think you'd ever put this into your deck innately. It has the issue that you can just steal it, and then you have the headache of dealing with this. I think Red Giant might be the actual biggest surprise in here, because I was kind of like okay with it at the time. I thought it would go into some sort of elemental deck, where you do tempo play out minions. But as I was putting together the decks, and actually I thought this might go into the fire elemental mage deck, I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I don't think this is unfair enough. I think it's actually too slow. And there are other giants I probably would have preferred to put into that deck instead, like the Azerite Giant, for example. So because of those reasons, and like situations where you might get some clunkier card around it, and eventually this card will just innately go to the left side of your hand, in which case you can only play one adjacent card, aka the right side card, to get the discounts. I think no one will run this card in the end. I think it's 1-star card, maybe 2, maybe people do try it, but I've decided to put it into 1. Relentless Wrathguard would only see play in Demon Warlock, I think, and I don't think it's good enough to see play in that deck, so womp womp. Doom Maiden is just a bad card, so that is why it's in the 1-star category. The final 1 stars are Space Pirate, Mutating Lifeform, and Braingale. Space Pirate, it's too slow. I don't think there's enough weapons that you want to discount as well by just 1 to get them up a turn sooner. Maybe something like a Window Shopper Demon Hunter would run this to get the weapon down 1 cost. That's a plausibility, but I'm just not convinced by it. If this was Battlecry, it would have more chance of seeing play, but on a Death Rattle, it's just a little bit too slow. Mutating Lifeform, again, it's just a bit too fair. You have to enrage this card, and there's not enough good decks right now that have enrage mechanics. Kind of watch out for this card, though, if Warrior gets an enrage mechanic. And speaking of which, Braingale I've given 1 star to, but it's because there is no Murloc package, so the card is stupid. However, if there is a set, and I'm going to assume there will be a Murloc set down the line, because otherwise, why would you print Braingale? This card might be 4 stars. Like, this card is this is the sussy card out of the space set, because it's a really, really strong effect. It's just the archetype doesn't exist for it to actually show off its effect. So 1 star right now, but watch this space. If the next set says, like, you know, oh, we have Murloc Shaman is coming back, or Murloc Warlock is coming back, this card will definitely get into that deck. And it's a zoo deck, of course, because Murlocs are always zoo decks. Watch this space, because this card could be bonkers. Then you'd think we're done, because we are done. We've done all the cards from the set. However, there are 2 other cards I want to rate, and they are event cards. Avatar of Hearthstone is playable right now in Hearthstone, which was Battlecry openly standard pack. Play all the cards from it. There is also, as just been revealed fairly recently, another card that's going to be added on, I think November the 13th, the final like event card for 30 years of World of Warcraft, which is Champions of Azeroth. Azeroth. There we go. You can tell I play Warcraft, right? Choose Alliance or Horde. Get 2 of their legendary champions and reduce their costs by 2. It's a 4-mana neutral spell, by the way. It's the second neutral spell ever printed. I guess right now, since I haven't done a reveal in the Champions of Azeroth, I think it's a pretty good card. Like, typically, legendary minions of the past are pretty good cards. Legendary are typically pretty good cards. I think for Alliance and Horde, you're going to be getting stuff like... oh my god, everyone's names just melted out of my brain. You're going to get, like, Gromash and stuff like that, and Thrall-type minions. What am I trying to think of? I'm trying to think of the Death Rattle one that steals a guy. It's, like, the most classic Hearthstone card, in my opinion. His name has just completely escaped me, but you'll get cards like that of that quality, and taking the 2 cost off them is actually pretty nice as well, because back then, they're probably over-mana costed for where they would be in modern Hearthstone, so I actually think this card is relatively okay. In terms of rating, Avatar of Hearthstone, I'm giving 1 star to. There's too many cards in Hearthstone which are just, you play this card, you lose the game, unless you're playing like a specific niche mechanic around that card. So it's just going to happen. You're going to play Avatar of Hearthstone, you're going to open Announce Darkness, and then you lose the game. Or you'll hit Wheel of Death. That, I don't know what the odds of that is, hitting a legendary bad card in a standard pack. But you'll hit it, you'll do it. The one time you get to do this on 9 mana, you'll hit that card, and you'll just lose. On the spot, you lose. So I just, because of those reasons... The high roll is really high, but the low roll is also extremely, extremely low. And I think the average card in Hearthstone typically is a bad card. I know it sounds kind of weird, but I think that it is true. So on average, I think you're getting a bad result from this. So all in all, I think it's going to be pretty bad. Champions of Azeroth, I've actually given 2 stars to. I think it's going to be, generally speaking, be pretty bad again. 4 mana, draw 2 cards is kind of what I'm seeing this as. Obviously, isn't good enough to see play. And actually, I was trying to think of what deck would run this card, and the only thing I came to like a conclusion of is... perhaps Minionless Mage might run this. Because if it's a spell for that deck, it gives you a nice value card. It probably wouldn't make that list, but you know what? Who knows? Maybe you would try it. At the very least, it's a fun card. I think this is November the 13th. This card is going to be added to an event, so try and get this while the event is up. Anyway, that is it. That is all of the star ratings for all of the cards from this set, and even some event cards as well. Let me know what you're excited to playing on. I think it's November 5th when the set actually fully releases. I am going to do one more video in the build-up to this, which is going to be the cards that I think are the top 10 most influential cards, which is sometimes cards that I think aren't necessarily going to be in a tier 1 deck, but will change, like, drastically the way that the game is played to some degree. I could tell you an example. For example, Exarch Niall will get onto this list, because I think it'll change Hunter quite drastically in the way that he's played and built going forwards. Anyway, thanks for watching these. If you enjoyed them, why not leave a like, comment, subscribe. Everything helps me out, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!